Really glad you guys are here and that we were able to provide this for you tonight. I appreciate you sitting down close. We're filming it again so that we can get a good copy out for folks. So we have to stay planted behind the podium. So that's why it's helpful for us if you guys just move on in and move down front. As you're coming in, make sure that you pick up, we've got an outline for you that you can follow along. We've got the list of the teams and the names who's served on the teams, and I'll explain that more in a little bit. We also have little index cards for you and pens, and that's so that we know that there's a lot of information we're going to be giving you, and you may have questions throughout the presentation. We want to make sure that we get all the way through the presentation because it is a lot of information. So we're going to ask you, if you do have questions, and we encourage those to write them down on your index card and wait till the end of time, and we will have an actual formal question and answer time. And if you, for whatever reason, you don't want to ask your question, you can also hand it to one of the leaders and they'll ask the question for you. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. And this is certainly another exciting time in the life of our church. When we named our capital campaign, The Excitement is Building, a couple of years ago, we really didn't realize how appropriate that name was. And the excitement just continues to build for us as a church. As many of you know, since our very beginning in 1973, River Hills Community Church has regularly engaged in a process of long-range planning, and with good reason, that we would always remain true to our original dream to be an interdenominational ecumenical church that really embraces, welcomes everyone in our community, and continues to reach out, to really make a difference, to reach every generation with the love of hope and hope of Jesus Christ. So that's been an ongoing process every 2 to 5 years since we got started. I want to begin with a quote by the Reverend Andy Stanley. Andy Stanley is a senior pastor of North Point Ministries out of Atlanta. It's one of the most effective and just rapidly growing churches in the U.S. today. And Andy says this: your church is perfectly designed to get the results you are currently getting. Now we hear that statement, we go, well, yeah, gosh, that does make sense. Your church is perfectly designed to get the results you're currently getting. So what are the results we're currently getting? Some of these you're going to have heard if you've been in worship over the last couple of months. Some of these statistics you will have heard, but I'll do one week, one another. So this is an opportunity for you to hear them all at once. I know we all travel and go visit kids and that kind of stuff, so I'll try to put it all together for us at one time. First of all, if we had simply kept track with the population growth in the community around us, and when I talk about that, I'm talking about a 10-mile radius around our church, we should be averaging attendance of about 1,000 per Sunday, per week. But we're actually only worshiping about a third of that. In just this year alone, we have had 27 deaths. 25 when we started this. We've had 2 more since then of our members, and it's more than that if you consider folks that consider themselves part of the church, but for whatever reason they're not formal members. The number is higher than that. We've only had 1 adult baptism this year, and we've had no member weddings. We have, since I came 4 years ago, had around in the low 80s of member funerals in 4 years. That's a pretty staggering number. Now keep that in mind when I tell you this next little bit, and that is the bulk of our financial security is largely through our older congregants. That probably comes as no surprise to you. For instance, this year in 2017, 75% of our pledged income is from people in the age range 61 years and up. So 75% of pledged income is from people 61 and up. 51.5% of our financial security and pledged income is from folks 71 years and up. And so we have to ask ourselves what happens to us as a church, what happens to our financial security as our very faithful older church members continue to age, to die, move on to the church triumphant, as we call it, or to move to be closer to family, to children, to grandchildren, or move into assisted living. And we've had a lot of folks do that this past year, move to be closer to children, move to be into assisted living facilities. Now, based on our current average attendance, and this is according to very solid church research statistics, we should have between 300 and 350 visitors per year. And yet we have far less than that. And what that tells us is that we have a front door problem. Some churches have a back door problem. So people come in, but for whatever reason, they're leaving as quick as they come in. We love people. We do a really good job of loving on people. And so typically, if we can get them in the door, we have a pretty good chance of getting them to stay. But we're having a problem really getting people in the front door in the first place, as far as the kind of statistics other churches have getting visitors in the front door. Compared with other churches that our consultant works with, we're actually in the bottom 10% for visitors, 10% in the bottom. Compared to other churches that our consultant works with, we're also in the bottom 10% in reaching young families. Compared to other churches, we're in the bottom 1% in reaching the unchurched, people that don't have a previous faith in Christ. So the bottom 1% for that, and that's based on number of adult baptisms. And since I've been here in 4 years, we've had 2 of those, 2 adult baptisms in the last 4 years. We're average, we're right at 43% on people who are engaged in service, so that's really good. But this is primarily because we have so many people that serve on official committees, and so they may be engaged in meetings, and that's how we measured that, but they're not necessarily engaged in actual hands-on or face-to-face ministry of some sort. There's some places where we're way above average, and one of those is in our engagement in small group ministries. We're way above average. We're at 70% of our membership engaged in small groups, and that is wonderful, fabulous. We're also very strong financially in our per capita giving. It's very, very strong. We're well above average. We're in the top 10%. Compared to other churches that our consultant works with. Our cash reserve level compared to other churches is at a very strong level. And our percentage spent on staff is about average at 49%. So certainly in that, there is some good news, and we can celebrate that, but there's a whole lot there that is concerning. We're concerned. I'm sure you're concerned as well. Our actual attendance rates have actually dropped in the last couple of years by about 9%, which when you consider just the death rate alone, we're doing pretty good to only be there. So we have to face reality as a friend who can really give us important information. And facing reality as a friend, we have to begin to ask questions like, who's missing? Who are we not effectively reaching? And then why? Why is that? Well, we understand from current demographic studies that the median age of folks who are living around us is 39 years old. 39 years old is the median age, and the largest population growth or age that is growing right now is young families, young adults that have children in the home, 0 to 17. That's the fastest area of population growth. We also know that we now live in what we call a post-Christian era. The percentage of adults that have little or no church background is up significantly. As a matter of fact, it's up percentage-wise more than it ever has risen since our country began. It's up by 30% just in the last 10 years. Up 30% in the last 10 years of adults who have little or none They would mark little or no church affiliation at all. So we ask ourselves, what do we need to do? How can we adapt what we're currently doing so that we can better reach people, so that we can better speak to their needs and really be able to connect them with Jesus? Because clearly that's what we want to do. What's worked in the past simply won't continue working at the same way it did in the past. And we all know this just from the things that are going on in our lives around us. I think technology is one of the best examples of that. Do any of you own a cell phone out there? Anybody? Probably most of us. And maybe how many of you still have a landline? A few of you. Most of us don't even have landlines anymore. Joe and I discontinued our landline maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. And there's a change for you. Language changes, right? Who had ever even heard of a landline 10 years ago? We didn't even call it such a thing. But technology has certainly changed. Maybe if you're like me, you remember party lines. My family had a party line when I was a kid. Anybody remember party lines? Yeah, exactly. And then we had those rotary phones that were just huge, and you had one, and they sat in the hallway, and everybody had to go to that spot, to the telephone table or the telephone bench or whatever, to talk on the telephone. And, it took forever to make a phone call because you did this and it had to. And then we got those really great Princess slimline phones. Do you remember those? How cool that was? Because you could get one in turquoise or pink or harvest gold, or avocado green, to match your decor. And they had those fabulous long cords. Now you had some freedom. Almost every room had a phone, and you could go from one side of the room to the other. You weren't tied right there. Of course, the wires would get all wound up, and you would get wound up, and it would take forever to unravel them. And then we started having those great remote phones, wireless phones. They were about the size of an apartment refrigerator, but it was great. It was awesome. It was awesome to have those. And now, most of us have cell phones, and on those phones, we don't just call folks or receive phone calls, but a lot of us are able to use that to get our emails and text with our children. My father, actually, he was so resistant, he was not going to go there. But just recently, my father got an iPhone, and I was talking to him, and I was asking him what he was doing on it, and if he was really using it to all the degree that he could. And he said, oh, heck no, I don't know what all it does. I basically got it because your kids don't answer the phone. And if I don't text them, I don't get to talk to them. I loved that answer. How cool is that? That my 87-year-old dad is learning how to text on a phone that scares him to death because he wants to be in communication with my kids and his great-grandkids. We can lament all day long how infuriating that is. It drives me crazy that my kids don't answer the phone. But I can spend all my time lamenting that fact and not be in relationship with them, or I can learn how to text. So those are the kinds of things we're talking about. And those same kind of things are true in the church today. We either innovate or we renovate, or eventually we die. After all things that are living have a natural life cycle. It's true for the church. Let's take a look at a natural life cycle for the church. As you look at this, you'll see that at the beginning phase, there's a phase we call the launch phase. And that's always a very exciting time. And some of you were here from the very beginning of River Hills Community Church, and you know the excitement of that launch. And it's a little bit chaotic. There are no systems in place. Nobody really knows what they're doing, but gosh, is it fun. And there's a whole lot of energy, and there's a whole lot of passion. And that really drives things forward. And then the church goes into a season of momentum growth because of that passion, because of that excitement. It is contagious, and you can't contain it. And people hear about it, and they're anxious to come, and they start coming, and there's just this tremendous momentum growth. But because there is this momentous growth, you go into a season of strategic growth. And that's where you're going, whoa, we're growing and we've got all these people coming and we've got all these things we want to do. We've got to put some systems in place. We've got to put some processes in place. We need to put some staff in place. And after that comes usually quite a prolonged season of sustained health. And certainly those of you who have been here for any length of time can look back at River Hills Community Church's history, and you can remember those seasons probably with just real distinctness and real fondness. All churches go through this. After a season of sustained health, you usually kind of slide into a period of maintenance where you've now created system and processes. You probably have buildings in place, things that need to be maintained and taken care of. And so that begins to take some of the focus, and you're doing those things. Nothing wrong with that. But over time, it begins to move into a season of preservation where you're just kind of wanting to keep things propped up, going just the way they have been. But you'll notice as you get on the back side of that, if you almost think of a roller coaster out at Carowinds, and the train comes up and over the side, once everything kind of gets up over that other side, it can pick up speed. And without some sort of very intentional interruption, a church can move through maintenance into that season of preservation and can, in time, and it can be fairly quick, move into a place called life support. So I just invite you to take a look at that, and just knowing our church as you do, ask yourself where you think we might be on that graph of life cycle. As leaders, it is our responsibility to bring our very best, our very best analysis, our wisdom, our strategic thinking, our research to these issues in order to be able to lead the way to even greater effectiveness going forward. And we do that, of course, knowing that the message that we are called to deliver never changes. Our message of grace, love, hope through Jesus is the same message it's always been for thousands of years now. The gospel doesn't change, but the way that we deliver that message, the method that we use to deliver that message can change and should change, and certainly has through all the many centuries. As a matter of fact, right now, we celebrate this time of year, we celebrate the Reformation, started by Martin Luther. I mean, boy, that was some major change. The church is always adapting and changing. So we can adapt the method, tweaking the how we deliver a message, and still remain very relevant and faithful to the what we are delivering and to the why. We can do a whole lot of good stuff as a church, but we have to regularly ask ourselves if what we are doing is what we are actually called to do. Jesus had the ability to do a lot of good stuff. I mean, after all, he was God. He could do any good stuff he wanted to do. But Jesus remained laser focused when it came to his calling, to why he had come. Let's take a look at Scripture, Mark chapter 1. Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Later, Simon and the others went out to find him, and when they found him, they said, "Everyone's looking for you." But Jesus replied, "I must go on to the other towns as well, and I will preach to them too. That is why I came." Jesus was very clear about his calling. And he didn't let others, as much as he loved them, as much as he cared about them, he didn't let anyone set an agenda for him or pull him away from his primary mission. As you know, we've been looking at the early church all through September and October, looking at the birth and growth of the early church during our current sermon series. And as the church was just getting started in what we might call the launch phase of that life cycle, the apostles found themselves, as the church was growing, they found themselves in quite a dilemma. When the church was small, they were quite capable of handling the day-to-day operations of the church, making sure everyone was taken care of, handling the pastoral care and all of those kinds of things, and still do the preaching and the teaching ministry. But as the church grew, they found that they were no longer able to really focus as they should on their primary calling, because just the demands of the church were too great. And so we see how in Acts 6, they got together and they restructured how they managed the church affairs so that the apostles could stay focused on the main mission and still make sure that the other needs were being taken care of. What really convicts me about this story, there are many things, but one is that it shows that it is possible to do the work of God without doing the work that God has really called us to do. It is possible to do the work of God without doing the work that God called us to do. That's true for individuals, and it's also true for churches. So as the long-range planning team began working with a consulting firm, a very respected church consulting firm, we began to analyze our current situation. And when we did, we were just confronted with a level of complexity within our current structure that we felt really distracts us, actually serves to distract us from the main calling, the main focus. We realized that that was true for us, that we could be doing a lot of work, a lot of good work, a lot of the work of God without really getting done our main calling as a church. So we took a look at our current structure. We did some very simple math, and here it is. We have 11 committees, and on those 11 committees, we have 9 people serving on each one, so that's 99 people serving in leadership. For those 99 people in a monthly meeting, let's say just a 2-hour monthly meeting, some go longer than that, some a little shorter, so we just average that. That ends up being about 200 hours that are spent in meetings every month. And then you take about 15 people serving in addition to that on the council, the church council, every month, and say that's a 3-hour meeting. Some go much longer than that. But then that's another 45 hours spent a month in meetings. And then, of course, there are certain key leaders that are also responsible going to finance meeting every month. And when you add those hours in as well, at minimum, we have over 250 people hours being spent per month in meetings rather than in ministry. Part of the consulting process that we engaged with included what they call a secret shopper experience, and that's where one of the consultants comes by the church at night, observes the church at night to see how well it's lit and if the signage outside makes sense, and helps you know if you don't know where you're going, where you're supposed to park, and what's going on in the different buildings and that kind of stuff. They also attended on a Sunday morning to the different worship services. They tried to test out the safety and security of our children's areas. They critiqued our bulletins, the worship flow, greeters, ushers, parking, decor, internal language, you name it, they critiqued it. And the resulting feedback coming from an organization that works with churches all throughout the U.S., churches of all sizes and flavors and shapes. It's just really been invaluable for us to be able to help us see ourselves more objectively, because we love our church just the way it is. Of course we do. And so it's hard for us to see it with an outside eye. Now, in addition to that, our lead consultant, Amy, shared with us a great illustration about the power of focus. The sun showers the earth every day with billions of kilowatts of energy. But because it is so widely diffused through the Earth's atmosphere, the worst that happens on any given day is maybe a little bit of sunburn. A laser, on the other hand, takes just a few kilowatts of energy, but because those few kilowatts are so tightly focused in a single direction, that laser can literally cut through steel. So we began to really ponder the power of focus. Looking at Jesus and his laser focus, we began to look at ourselves. We began to look at our mission. Of course, knowing that any Christian church's mission is just going to be in some way a reflection of Jesus' mission to share good news with those who haven't already heard. I mean, after all, Jesus said, he states it right out in Luke 19:10. He said, I came to seek and save the lost. And then Jesus commissioned us to be on mission with him. We're all familiar with Matthew 28, the Great Commission. Jesus said, therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And then, of course, I hope this is very familiar to you, Acts 1:8. We've been using this every Sunday, all through September and October. Jesus said, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere, in Jerusalem, in Judea, in Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And so we worked together to come up with an outwardly facing and focused statement that would really succinctly state our mission as a church. The collective wisdom of the group landed here. Our mission, or you can state it as we exist to, whatever, is to reach every generation with the love and hope of Jesus Christ. Now, at first in this process, once we had done this, we identified different areas, or we call them action initiatives, that we felt would really move us forward in being able to effectively fulfill this mission. But at first we identified 8, and we were like, those are all great, and we'll have them kind of, what do you call it, in the bullpen or whatever, I don't know, sports terminology, but anyway, we'll have them waiting out here. We're not going to lose those, but 8's too many for us to focus on, so we decided on the 4 that we felt kind of rose to the top, that we felt if we really focused on those, they would really be able to move us forward very effectively. So we chose 4, and then we split up the entire LRP, long-range planning team, onto someplace on one of those 4 action initiatives to be studied more in depth, and then to be able to make recommendations. And then we took the entire church council. Many of them were already on the LRP, but we took the rest of the church council, divided them up as well, so that the entire church council was now serving on this larger long-range planning initiative. The entire group met together quarterly, but then the individual teams have met together very, very, very regularly, often every week. Some of the groups have met more than once a week. The 4 teams that we started with and have really spent our time on are vision, weekend services, staffing and structure, and amazing guest experience. You've got lists of teams in front of you, and we'll put them for you here on the screens. The Vision Rollout team was led by Steve Park, and I think Steve is here today. On that team as well is Scott Gilliman, Sherry McKinney, Margaret Meyer-Cuno, me, Cindy Smith, and Mark Woolery. On the Weekend Services team, Rick Mullen is here, and he led that team. And the teams are still being led, they're still engaged. Rick Mullen, Bobby Little, Kermeen Yan, Teresa Renner, Catherine Henson, Jerry Cooper, Lee Youngblood, Jay Stowe, and John Leon Lewis. On the staffing and structure team, that is being led by Mark Cook. We also on that team have Jane Jones, Chris Leff, Doug Meyer-Cuno, Joe Renner, Marion Strakatos, David Thomas, and Al Wydell. And on the amazing guest experience team is being led by Carr Bennett. And on that team is David Allen, Pastor Jason, Kim Cook, George Gessner, Marcy Little, Joe Montgomery, Rob Morris, and Martha Stein. I just want to personally and publicly thank these folks, because they have really given so much of this past year of their life really in prayer and focus, working together in their teams, and it's out of their great love for the Lord and their great love for River Hills Community Church that they have given that time. And as the pastor of River Hills, I'm just so indebted to that. So now we want to share with you a little bit from each one of these teams, and I'm going to be sharing from the Vision Rollout team because I served on that team, and then I'm going to turn it over to Carr and he'll share from the other teams. The Vision team is charged with communicating the vision. So the vision that we came up with, which is, of course, to reach every generation with the love and hope of Jesus Christ. Also charged with helping the other teams roll out what they come up with. So that's all part of it. We've been doing that through a variety of ways. We've been publishing from the beginning monthly articles in our monthly newsletter, the Koinonia. We have been collecting through this entire process key vision, frequently asked questions, FAQs, and these will also be published when we finish with this process. Life stories to share in worship, as well as on the website. And you've seen a couple of those in worship so far, and you'll be seeing more of those to come. And that's people who are a part of our church, kind of telling what they love about the church, what brought them here, what's helpful for them, how does it help their lives every day. Vision has also been in charge of these town hall meetings. This is our 6th one. Certainly the current sermon series that I've been preaching since the beginning of September, which has been all about alignment to this current mission and vision of the church. And then also a total redesign of our website, and that will launch within the next couple of days. What we've learned in this process that we didn't know before is that 60% of all visitors will now visit you for the first time via your website. So they will come to the website, they will read what you believe, they will check out the staff, they will watch sermons, and they'll do all of that. They'll check out the children's ministry area, youth ministry, and they're going to do all that before they ever walk through the door for the first time. So we've really tried to mentally kind of shift our thinking, because that was new to us, to realize that's our front door. So we hired a different consulting firm that's all about websites, and they have led us in this process, and we totally redesigned our website, and you'll be seeing that very shortly. Of course, anything that we do that's important, it's important that we measure that, we be able to gauge our effectiveness and how well we're doing. But it can be hard when we're talking about spiritual things. How do you measure someone's faith, or how close they're becoming to Jesus, or is their life being transformed? Those can be difficult things to measure. So we did come up with a few measurements that we feel like will be able to really give us an idea if we're being effective in what we want to do. With a few adjustments in these 4 areas that we've shared with you, we believe that by the end of 2018, so by the end of next year, we believe that we can double the number of first-time and returning guests. We also believe that we will see 30 to 40 new families come alive in Christ and become fully engaged in the life of the church. And we believe that we can significantly decrease the amount of time that our people are spending in meetings so that they are released to be able to increase the time that they're spending in hands-on ministry. So I'm going to turn it over to Carr now. Carr will be sharing from the other 3 initiatives. I do ask you again just to hold your questions for now. Write them down if you need to on your cards, and we will get to those as soon as we finish with the presentation.
All right, thank you. So you just heard Pastor Gail talk about the big why we're doing these things, the vision and the mission. What I'm going to do is take some time and do a deeper dive into the teams that we had set up. I'm going to talk about why they explored what they explored, when they hope to accomplish the changes that they're looking to make, and what those changes are. And some of these things have already been done, so you'll see that in just a second. So we're going to start with Weekend Services, which was the team led by Rick Mullen. And the first initiative they took on was updating the sanctuary. So why were they looking to do this? They wanted this space where we're standing right now to be a little more inviting, more approachable. They wanted to increase the visibility from the congregation standpoint when you're looking up here, have less distractions, also make things more flexible and more mobility. So what you've seen happen so far clearly is the choir pews were removed, the chairs were brought in, this area here was opened up. The lecterns that we had before have been replaced with this clear lectern. Our table has been moved down. So you've seen a lot of these changes, and what that's really done is open this space up, and the functionality has increased. If you came to see the orchestra that was here, if you saw the dance that we had a few weeks ago, that was a lot easier to do and a lot more user-friendly because of these changes that were made. So those are the reasons and the why they did what they did up here, and we've had a lot of great comments on how this space looks after these changes have been made. What are they looking for towards the future? So they're looking to add some shades to these windows back here. You guys know how bright it gets in here. So we're looking to put some shades here to help with that. Some changes to the altar risers and also the screens. As we use these screens in worship, we want to make sure that they're more visible, they're easier to see. So we're going to look at updating the screens. The next thing they took a look at was the Sunday worship schedule. So what happens on Sundays. The reason they wanted to look at this, several of them. One, they wanted to create a common small group time, really something that brings us all together in one space at one time. You know, we have the family table today. We have our services in 2 different locations, and we think there may be a better way to bring everybody together in one spot so we know everyone that's in our church family. We also wanted to have 2 full sessions of Shout and Shine. So what happens today, you may or may not know, but Shout and Shine is our children's ministry. It's a great outreach ministry that we have. But unfortunately, the way we are structured today, the only way your children will receive or be able to participate in Shout or Shine ministry is if you come to the 1045 service. And if you're not coming to the 1045 service, then your children do not get to participate in Shout and Shine. And just to give some background around Shout and Shine and how powerful of a ministry this is for us, we have a couple that started coming to our small group class here recently. And they were new to the area. They moved here from Pennsylvania, and they were looking for a church. They were looking for a church home. So they had been out visiting other churches. They came here for 1045 worship one Sunday. They took they have 2 children. They took their children back to Shout and Shine. And the older boy at the end of the service came running out of Shout, ran up to his mother and said, "This is the best church ever. We have to go to this church." And I'll tell you, they haven't left. I think they've missed one Sunday since that point in time. And that just shows you how powerful that ministry is. So we wanted to make that accessible to all folks that come to church here. We needed to also have better utilization of the staff and the volunteers that work every Sunday morning. So the recommendation is being made to combine the 8 and the 1045 services into one service. So today we have an 8 o'clock traditional service, we have the 9:15 contemporary service, and then a 1045 traditional service. What we're going to move to is a 9 o'clock traditional service that will happen here in the sanctuary, much like it does today. In the 8 o'clock service, there's communion served each week. That will still be available prior to the 9 o'clock service, so if someone would like to receive communion, it will be served each week. And during the 9 o'clock, just like happens at the 1045 every week, once a month now, we'll continue to serve communion on the first Sunday of each month in the 9 o'clock traditional service. At that time, we will have a Shout and Shine program for the children. And then after that's over, at 10:15, there will be a common small group time. So now what we have today is we have small groups meeting at 8, 9:15 or 9 o'clock, and at 10:45. So they're spread out at 3 different times throughout Sunday mornings. What we're going to do here is bring it all into a single time at 10:15. They'll all happen here in the sanctuary building, in this building, and they'll last for about 45 minutes. We'll also have the family table during this time, so much like we do today, that will still go on at 10:15. So if you're not going to a small group but you want to come and socialize, you'll be able to do that. And then we'll also have our clubhouse children's time at that point in time. So it'll be a 45-minute clubhouse time, and that's what you would think of today as traditional Sunday school. That's what the clubhouse ministry is today. So that will happen at 10:15. And then at 11:15, the experience service will happen, and then we'll have Shout and Shine number 2. So if you're coming to the experience service, you bring your children here, they will now be able to have the Shout and Shine ministry, and then you can go to the 11:15 experience worship. A couple other things that this team is looking at. I mentioned the communion. The children today at the 10:45 worship come into the traditional service, come into the service, stay for about 15 minutes or so, and then head back to Shout and Shine. When we make the change to the new morning schedule, what will happen logistically is the children, once they get checked in for Shout and Shine, will just proceed directly back to the Shout or Shine class that they're in, and they will stay there for the entirety of the worship service. This does several things. One, if you put yourself in the shoes of a guest and you're coming here for the first time, you have children, you're in this age group with 0 to 17, you're dropping your children off for the first time. You want to make sure, one, they're secure. We'll talk about that in a bit. But two, it is somewhat disjointed to take them, check them in, meet some folks, bring them back into the service, have the talk, have Marcy talk to the children here, then proceed out, and then Pastor Gail then again says if you're checking your children in for the first time, go back out again. So as a guest, that's not the greatest experience in the world. They also don't have the time that they need back in Shout. So the way we do it today, their time is compressed to about 35 to 40 minutes, because once you get the children out of here and you get them calmed down enough to start worship, it has eaten into their time. So what we'd like to do is have them have the whole time back there. The other thing that does for us, again, thinking from a guest standpoint, if you have gone back to Shout and Shine or served back there, you have children back there, what you know is that they don't want to leave until Marcy's done, until the Shout service or the Shine service is done. Because it takes a little longer than typically they have, we create this line of just people waiting to pick up their kids. So you have just parents standing up down the hallway waiting to get their children. This will help alleviate that, which will create a much better flow for us on Sunday mornings. The last thing that this team is looking at is considering moving the experience service from the Life Center over here. This is down the road. This is not happening in the near future. There's several changes that would have to be made in order to do that. Bobby is working with a consultant to see if those changes can be made, but keeping the sanctity of this space. So that is paramount, and we want to make sure that we can do that before Experience would consider moving over here. If they can, there will be consideration to that. If not, then we'll figure out what we're going to do. But that's looking at Experience down the road. So in summary, this group has been working really hard to make some changes that will make this church a more welcoming and an approachable place. Want to make sure that our flow on Sunday mornings makes a lot of sense and really works well, keeps us together as a family, gives us some time to be together, but also make sure that we're using our facilities and our staff and our volunteers in the best way we possibly can. And at the end of the day, just like all these changes are, it's about bringing more people to know Jesus in this community. And that's what these changes will help us do. So that's a look at our weekend services. We're going to move over to staff and structure. This team was led by Mark Cook. Pastor Gail has talked about this already, but how many folks here today are at the church at least 1 hour in a meeting once a month? So if you're here once a month for at least an hour, how about 3 hours and then 5 hours? A lot of us are spending a lot of time. This was the point that Pastor Gail, yeah, 10 hours. No, I'm just kidding. So this is what the point Pastor Gail was trying to make a minute ago, is that we're spending a whole lot of time in meetings and not as much time as we should in ministry. So there's a couple things that that we looked at here. But why are we looking at staffing and structure? One, what we know is that our structure does matter. The structure that we operate under either helps or hinders the mission that we're trying to achieve. And what we've found working with our consultants is that the structure that we have is showing signs of ineffectiveness. It's causing us to be a little more inwardly focused than we really need to be to achieve our mission, and not as much outwardly focused. So it also inhibits the ability of the folks that we've hired here, our staff, to really do what we've hired them to do. We've got very talented people here. We hired them for a reason to be here. And sometimes our structure inhibits their vision, their goals for their ministry from being able to be achieved. So what are we trying to do? Clearly want to develop a culture of empowerment for our staff so they feel empowered to move forward and achieve the mission that they've been called here to do. We also want to adjust the structure so that we decrease the amount of time that we're spending in meetings and increase the amount of time that we're out there doing the work. So I'm getting ready to show you some charts. They're going to be difficult to see. I realize that already. I'm going to talk through them as best I can. They'll be on the screens, but they'll also be sent via an email probably tomorrow or the next day. Okay, so you'll see these up close in the next couple of days. This is the first one. Okay, so this is our current structure, folks. This is what we're operating under today. So what you see is we have the congregation. The council reports to the congregation, as you can see on this chart. Then the senior pastor falls under the council, and then you see the committees that Pastor Gail was just speaking about, the 11 committees that make up the council. And then what we put under the committees, which is our structure, is our staff and the staff functions. And then from there, what we did was we said, okay, what are the reporting lines? What do the reporting lines look like for our members, for our staff members? Where are they reporting to? For the committees, what are they responsible for? So a line can go either way. And what you can see is when you start drawing these lines, who's responsible to finance, who's responsible to trustees, who's responsible to the foundation, you can see this. It gets very confusing. This we're calling the spaghetti slide because that's exactly what it looks like. It's just a bunch of lines. And you can see how this may hinder our council, our volunteers, especially our staff, in achieving the mission and the vision that they've been called here to achieve. So the committee said, or the team said, let's take a look at this structure and see if we can simplify it. So what we're going to show you next is the structure that's going to be proposed to you. So, and I say proposed to you, this will be a bylaw change. This will be voted on at the annual meeting, which will happen on December 10th. So this will be in there, and this is the structure you're going to see when you get your copy of the bylaws in the next couple of weeks. The recommendation is to build a leadership council. This leadership council will be made up of 10 members, 9 of them voting, the senior pastor. Then we have, you see, a minister of congregational care, and an executive pastor. I'm going to stop there for just a second. The senior pastor is Pastor Gail. Okay, so Pastor Gail, you can use that as senior pastor. She is going to continue to be our senior pastor. She's not going anywhere. We just didn't put names in any of these spots. Okay, so senior pastor is Pastor Gail. Minister of Congregational Care is Pastor Jason's role. Pastor Jason is not leaving either. He's here. He's going to continue to maintain that role. And that role will look very much like it looks today. Then you see executive pastor. We use the term executive pastor because what the function that this person the function that this person will do for us when we're out in the marketplace looking for this person, that's the term that's used. Executive pastor is the term that's used. But this does not mean this is an ordained person. It does not, they will not be preaching from the pulpit here or an experience. They will not, that's still going to be Pastor Gail and Pastor Jason. They're not truly a pastor in the sense that we think of Pastor Gail and Pastor Jason. Think of them more as a business manager, an operations manager, if you were thinking in the corporate world. And then you see our current staff. So this structure, the executive pastor will manage the operation, the day-to-day of the church. The staff will roll up to the executive pastor, and that person will handle everything that happens here on a day-to-day basis. The minister of congregational care, Pastor Jason, his role, again, will remain very much unchanged. And then Pastor Gail's role, the senior pastor role, will be in charge of the spiritual health and well-being of the church and the vision. So she will set the vision for the church, or the senior pastor will set the vision for the church and be the spiritual leader of the church. They will all report up to the leadership council. Go ahead, Rick. The leadership council will be made up, again, of 10 folks. This is a picture of what the leadership council will look like. The way that it will be structured is that they will serve 3-year terms. 8 of them will be members of the congregation, plus the senior pastor, plus the executive pastor. That's your 10. But the executive pastor will not have voting rights. So the senior pastor and the 8 members of the congregation will be the voting members of the leadership council. There's titles in there, chair, vice chair, so on and so forth, but that's the structure, and those are the roles that would be filled. The way this will be instituted at the beginning, so how will this be set at the beginning? We'll have 4 members of the current council. So the current council we have today, 4 members of that current council will be appointed to this leadership council. Then 4 members of will be nominated from the congregation and appointed to the leadership council. So that's how we'll get the total of 8 at the beginning. They will also have, in this first iteration, they will have staggered terms. So some will be on for 3, some 2, some 1. That way, we're rolling off every year right at the onset of this. So no one's going to sit on, we're not going to have 10 members that sit for 3 consecutive years. So it will be staggered, and the rolling will start after the first year. So again, 8 members of the congregation. At the beginning, it'll be 4 from the existing church council, 4 from the congregation, plus the senior pastor, plus the executive pastor. But the executive pastor, again, will not have voting rights. So then if we move forward, what you'll see, hit it for me, Rick. I'm sorry, I'm probably off script. There we go. We'll be eliminating all the committees that exist today. So of those, all the committees that we have today, those will be eliminated. Those will be replaced by teams. Now you may say that sounds like semantics, and I'm going to explain why it's not. But the role of committee will be eliminated, and the teams will be built. So how does that look? Today's structure, we have these committees that are nominated from the congregation. They're sent to the nominations committee. Then they're assigned a role on one of the 11 committees, and then they're voted on by the congregation at the annual meeting. There's good and bad parts to the committee. One, you may be put on a committee that you really have a heart for, and that's where you want to serve, and you get to serve there. You also may be on a committee that's not really exactly where you feel like you're called to serve, or it's not where your heart is, but maybe your senior pastor called you or somebody called you and said, hey, we really need you to serve on this committee, and you say, okay, I'll do it. Now, if you love that committee that you're on, and it's really where you're filled called to work, you only get to live there or work there for 3 years, because by our bylaws, you have to be gone after 3 years. If you're on the committee and you don't really want to be there, well, you're there for 3 years because our bylaws say you're there for 3 years. A lot of the committees are really there to do the administrative work and not the actual work. Teams will replace these committees. So we'll move those committees away, and then teams will replace them. Teams will be built for 2 functions. One, to fill a role for the council or fill a role for the staff. So if staff needs support in something, they will create a team to help support that. So I'll use Marcy for example. Marcy may say, you know what, I need to build a team to help support children's ministry. So if you really have a heart for working with children and that's what you want to do, then you would go to Marcy and say, I really want to help serve on the team for children. And that's where you get to serve. If Bobby needs a team for worship, for experience, then and that's really where you feel called to work, then you can go and talk to Bobby and say, hey, I want to serve on this team. You have the ability to serve on that team where you really feel called. And you're serving by doing the work, not by sitting in a meeting and doing the administrative voting function that a committee does today. The staff will handle that. The council will also have teams built at different times. Now, by bylaws, there will be 2 permanent teams to the council. So the council will have 2 permanent teams that report to it. One will be the foundation trustees. So there will be a director of foundation trustees, which will be one of those 10 council members, and there will be a foundation trustees team that's created by the bylaws to support the foundation. Then there will also be a director of missions on the council, which will be, again, one of those 10 people, and they will have a team, which would be the missions team, to support the missions of the church. So those 2 teams are defined. The rest of the teams are basically there to support the needs of either the council or the staff. Those will be voluntarily served, and again, you're not going to have the 3-year terms. You're not going to have the administrative functions. You're going to be doing the work. Rick, if you'll hit that a couple times, you're going to see some highlights here. So what you're looking at here is just a blown-up picture of that little one. I'm not sure that makes it even any easier for you to see. Those two are the leadership council. That's the foundation and the missions team that are on there. And if you'll hit it again, Rick. So the reason we're moving to this structure again is it's a structure of empowerment for our staff and for our volunteers. We create this executive pastor role. The executive pastor, again, is going to be more like a business manager or operations manager for the church itself. They will not be preaching. This role, job description is being built currently. Hopefully will be out next month. The job will be posted. Our goal is to have it filled in the first quarter of 2018. Funding for this has been already incorporated by finance, so the funding is there to do that, and hopefully we'll get this person on board relatively quickly. And then, again, the senior pastor role, Pastor Gale's role, will be the spiritual leader and the vision leader of the church. This will, again, take a bylaw adjustment, which will be voted on December 10th. You will be seeing the bylaws 30 days prior to that, which would be November 10th. And ultimately, this structure will allow us to spend more time doing the work and less time in these meetings that we're in. Okay, the last team is the Amazing Guest Experience team. So this was the team that I had the opportunity to lead. We have 5 different sections, so I'll try to go through this relatively quickly so we can talk about them. So the first one is the children's wing, check-in and security. So why do we need to do this? Some of the feedback we got during our secret shopper time from our consultant was that we needed to secure the children's wing. It wasn't very secure right now. And if I'm a guest, if someone is a guest in the church, it's pretty important that the kids are safe and that feeling of security is there for your children. So what did we do here? You've seen a lot of this done already, but we ordered a check-in center. We have now 3 iPads. We've sectioned off the children's wing. We're following a program called Safe Sanctuary. Safe Sanctuary basically says that you have to have a secure children's area. You have to have a secure check-in and check-out process, which we didn't really have before, but we have now. If you're ever back there, serving back there, taking your kids back there, grandkids back there, you'll see that there is a defined process on scanning folks in and out. We keep a list of who's checked in, who's checked out. Safe Sanctuary also requires that we have bathrooms that are dedicated to just for the children and people that have been cleared to work with the children. So if you're working with the children, if you're doing this, you already know you've gone through a background check and everything, and you have to do that every year. If you want to serve with the children, that's something you'll do. So all the folks in the back with the children have gone through background checks, and the bathrooms that are there have to be defined just for children and people that are approved to work with the children. So you've seen that sectioned off back there. You also saw some flow change. This happened a while ago, so you may not even notice it now, but we've closed off the 2 doors that lead to the office hallway back there, Pastor Gale's office, the door on this side, and the one over near Pastor Jason and Bobby and Marcy's office. Both of those have been shut down, as well as the doors in the back, so there's no way to enter the children's wing except through the check-in center. So that's really helped our flow, too. It's keeping everybody going in one direction. All right, the next one is maximize guest interaction. This was led by Pastor Jason and David Allen. This really has to do with identifying guests in the parking lot. So before they come through the doors, how do we identify them? And then I'll take that into the transforming the gathering space. So what we really wanted to make sure we could do was say that we see guests, we know who they are, we want to give them a great guest experience. Unfortunately, today, it's really hard to identify who a guest is and who is not. One of the things that happens quite often at churches that we looked at and working with a consultant is parking areas designed just for guests. So one of the things that this group, part of our team, has decided that we need to do is section off guest parking out here in the front so we can identify them when they come in. As Pastor Gale said, 60% of the people visit us on the website. We'll call that out on the website, let people know where to go, use some signage to call that out. And that way, for folks that are going to be greeters, which we'll hear about in just a second, know what's going on, they know who those people are, and they can identify them and bring them into the gathering space as guests quickly. We then looked at the gathering space itself, and we said, okay, we want this space to be more welcoming for our guests. We need it to facilitate easier guest introduction. We want it to have a very, very good flow, and we also want to make sure that the appearance is nice and up to the standards that it should be. So we're going to work to transform the gathering space. This is a little longer term plan. We're working with an architect to really redesign everything from the gathering space all the way back to the children's wing. So we had a meeting with him Wednesday evening. He's going to build the plan for us. We're also going to get rendering, so we'll be able to show you what all this looks like before any of it takes place. But essentially, it will really help us open this gathering space, use it a lot better than we're using it today. You guys supported building a whole lot of space out here. We want to make sure we're using it. We want to make sure that we're using the facility as best we can. There's some great ideas around that, opening up more bathrooms, opening up more classrooms, and also a much better children's wing. So we're working on all that. That's part of this team. What we can do immediately is start to move the family table around the gathering space a little bit. We're also going to train greeters. So today, for the traditional service, we have ushers, which serve a great function, and they're going to continue to do what they're doing. But we also want to train greeters. We want to have people that work doors out and bring people in. If we can, the earlier we can capture them, the more information we can get from them, and the better guest experience they'll have. So we're going to continue to work on that. The next team is signage. This was Rob Morris and Joe Montgomery. So why are we looking at signage? One, we just want to make sure that our campus is identifiable to the community. When you come on campus, we want to make sure that you know where you're going. You're not looking for a place or having to really search out what you're looking for. We want to make sure that the community knows what's going on here and the programs and things that we're offering. We want to make sure that they're aware of what's happening. So what are we looking to do here? We want to build a large electronic sign out on Highway 49, whether it's a single sign, multiple sign. We're not really sure about that yet because you may or may not know, but this all takes approval from the county. So we're working on getting county approval, which we've done in the past, and we didn't get it, but we feel pretty good about the opportunity for us to get it today. So we're going to continue to work to get county approval for this. Pending, once that gets done, we would like to move to an electronic sign out front. We also need to update the signage in this building and also the signs out on the streets that direct people to where they go. We definitely want to update that and create a much better flow. We're also going to do some signage things for the parking lot, like you heard me say about guest parking and things like that. We're going to update those signs so people know where to go. We're hoping to get this done in the first quarter. From a funding standpoint for the electronic signs, and I should have mentioned this earlier, also for the iPads and the check-in center for children, that was all funded and is agreed to be funded by the foundation trustees. So if you've given money to the foundation or you're currently serving on the foundation, thank you very much, because that money is going to great use. It's securing the kids, and it's going to work to make this building much more identifiable in the community. So the foundation has agreed and is paying for those things. The last one is a renaming effort of the church. So the team here, I'm going to take a little bit longer on this. The team here was the entirety of the Amazing Guest Experience team. Also, Pastor Gale served on this initiative, as well as a consultant that works with churches and other businesses around marketing. So we had that person on this team as well. So why are we looking at doing something like this? We want a name that better reflects our current mission here in the community, that's more welcoming to folks in the area. We want to make sure that it's something that can capture this vision that Pastor Gale just rolled out in an effective way. We also are going to do a logo refresh the logo so it's easily identifiable to folks in the community as we move through the community. When we'd like to target this, this is going to be something that's voted on at the annual meeting. So I'd like you to think about this process is somewhat like the senior pastor search process. In the senior pastor search process, as we followed today, a committee, in today's world, a committee is formed. That committee goes out, searches for the senior pastor, does a lot of work there. Once they've decided on a candidate, they bring the senior pastor in, and then the congregation votes on the pastor. This will be much that same process in that this team, our team, has worked really, really hard on work on the name itself, working with this consultant, doing polling, looking at the area, looking at the logos, really trying to identify what will make sense for our church. We'll bring that out in multiple phases. On November 12th, I believe that's the Sunday, whatever the Sunday is following the 10th, so I think that's the 12th, we will bring this to the small group classes, and we'll talk to you about what the name is and the logo. Then we're going to have some meetings on the 19th, much like this, 30-minute meetings, and then again it'll be disseminated in the bylaws. So that's how we'll get the name out, and then we'll have a vote on the annual vote on December 10th. Whether you like the name and approve it, then we'll move forward with it. If not, then we would go back to the drawing board and start over. What does the name need to look like? You know, it's been recommended to us that the name be shorter in nature, 3 to 4 syllables. It doesn't draw us or tie us to a certain geographic area. It's something that's welcoming, something that's really easy just to say, and it's also something that's easy to identify. The logo will follow the same idea, something that's simple and easily identifiable to the church. I've talked a little bit about how are we doing this, but again, this team has spent a ton of time working with this consultant, doing a lot of praying over this name, doing a lot of research outside of the community around the name, and we're really excited about bringing the new name to you because I think it'll achieve the goals of being more welcoming to the community. Okay, with that said, before we jump to Q&A, which we're getting ready to, I know that was a ton of stuff, but I did also want to take time, as Pastor Gail did, to thank everybody that's been working on these teams really, really hard. Your commitment to this, thank you very much for that. Again, to the foundation trustees for helping us fund a lot of this. And if you're a deacon or shepherding deacon, or if you've just been in the congregation praying for us, you may or may not know, but the shepherding deacons and deacons pray constantly for the LRP teams. They know when everybody meets, they know when everybody gathers, and they're in constant prayers we're doing that. And there is no way we could achieve the work that we've achieved and do the things that we've done without that constant prayer from our deacons and from our congregation. So thank you all very much for that. Okay, with that said, questions. So we have mics that I think will be brought around by Steve. So if you have a question, if you just raise your hand, and then Pastor Geller and myself will be able to answer it. Steve, we got one right.
We on? Yep.
Right here, Steve. Oh, sorry.
You people have done a great job in planning for the future and making the most of everything you have. I was very interested in the fact that church members 71 and over are contributing more than half the money for this church. They are your traditional people, as well as some of those in their 60s too, and they're contributing a lot of money. There are many of us feel that we really need a traditional service at 11. It is very difficult for some older people who have to help a spouse get ready to go to church to be there by 9. And look at our choir. A lot of our choir are senior members too. Should they have to come at 8 o'clock for practice? There are many of us that feel desperately that we would like an 11 o'clock service where the choir could come at 10 to practice. But thank you for all you're doing.
Absolutely. And Pat, thank you so much. We do understand, and we have heard from folks that that's going to be a real hardship for some folks. And that is definitely, it's heartbreaking. We have gone back and discussed it again. You know, part of what we've had to do is look at the entire process and what we feel like will be best for the mission of the church, the current mission of the church. When we make those decisions, I'm glad that we didn't have individual faces in mind, because knowing individual faces make it hard. We weren't doing it based on individual faces. We were doing on what we felt like was best for the entire church. So we know it's a hardship. It's certainly something that we will continue to keep looking at. This is the schedule we've set at this time. We certainly hope that the older congregants will do their best to try to make that work, see if that will work. And we know that people are inconvenienced on both sides. We've heard from folks that currently are coming to the 9:15 contemporary service that they're not happy about moving, to that time. So, we took a lot of things into consideration. We know it's inconvenient on every side, and that's a difficult thing to know.
You mentioned the importance of a welcoming and a pretty nice appearance for the guests coming in. I love those windows, and the pine swaying and the cross in front of it is almost a spiritual experience coming in.
Yeah.
And if you close that off, to me, you close a lot of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And Joan, the intention is not to close it most of the time, just there's certain times and certain times.
You can pull them up.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes,
Sorry, I
yes,
didn't do a
yes.
very good job explaining that. Yep, they will not be closed most of the time, but they will be installed just for instances where we would need to cover them. But
There's
thank you.
times when it's so bright at certain times of the day that it's just very difficult.
implication was that there would be no multiple terms on this council. Is that correct?
There'll be 3-year terms.
Yeah.
They'll be staggered,
Yeah,
three.
I got that,
Yep, okay, yep.
but no second term for anybody.
Oh, actually, just like exists now, there is the opportunity for a second term that could be consecutive before needing to roll off.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Understand.
But a chair cannot serve more than 2 consecutive years.
Oh, okay, great.
Thanks, Doug.
And there is no board of trustees as we have traditionally had.
That's correct. It would be a team, whether, facilities, grounds team, something like that. But, so there's certainly still need for the function of that, but it will not be a committee as it is currently.
So there are no legal implications to that.
No, we've done our homework around that, and the Leadership Council will serve as that legal representation.
You used a couple of times the statement enlists empowerment. I can't even say it. Enlists empowerment. What does that mean?
So the goal is to, right now, we won't go back to it, but the slide that I had up around the staff and the structure that we have today, the staff is not empowered to make decisions today on things that they feel like they need to move forward with. And it could be as simple as, Marcy wanting to order a curriculum for the children, right? If she wanted to order a curriculum for the children, that would actually have to go through multiple committees before she could actually do that. It has to be approved on multiple different levels. Empowerment would be, Marcy says, you know what, this is the best curriculum for our children today. I think we're going to order that. This structure would allow her to go ahead and move forward with that, as opposed to passing through Children's Committee, Finance, and Council.
The back part of the church where the children are now housed during the regular sessions,
Yes.
have we given any thought at all to redoing that area?
Yes, a lot of thought. And you,
Terrible waste of time, waste of space, the way it's being used now.
I couldn't agree more. So the architect that we had in here on Wednesday, and I'm not sure how quick he's going to get these renderings and plans out, but they will be quick, or they hopefully will be quick, but it is a complete redo, Don, of that wing. So basically from the elevator back. And some of the things that they're looking at doing, I guess I can share this.
Sure.
Some of the things that they're looking at doing is the nurseries, where right now we have the 2 nurseries set up, moving those back into that children's wing. Building, we have plumbing back there, so building children's bathrooms in the back wing. So if you think about where those fire doors are today, that would actually start the children's wing all the way in the back, which would reopen the family room. The nurseries would then be could be classrooms, could be offices, just depending on what function we needed those to serve. The bathrooms that are currently there would then reopen. That back staircase that's there would then be open. So basically, we would move all of that back. And the only reason we can't do that today is the way our bathrooms are set up. So what we're hopefully going to be able to do in the very near future is build those bathrooms back there, and that'll be our start of being able to move everything back. So it will truly be like a children's wing back in the back.
It sounds like a significant improvement, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you. We had one up here, I think, Steve.
I'd like to know what the difference is between a team member and a committee member.
That's
Sounds like the same thing to me.
So a committee, so right now committees are administrative in nature. They don't actually, they oversee, so I'll use Don's, the example I just gave Don, I'll just use that again. So there's a children's committee that rolls up to Marcy. That committee basically approves and unapproves things for Marcy to do. That is their function. They're not there to necessarily do work. They're there to approve what children's can do, or send a recommendation to finance, and or send a recommendation to council. So that's the committee structure, and that's kind of holistic across all the committees. The team itself would say, Marcy would make the decisions for children, and then the team would actually do the work. So if she said, we need to, again, using the same example, we need to move to this new curriculum. That team would be empowered, well, she would be empowered to make that decision. That team would then go out and do that, help her bring that curriculum to the children, bring it to the community, whatever that may be. So what we have today, the committee structure, tells people that you're spending 250 hours a month basically in an administrative role. We want to eliminate that administrative function from the congregation and move the congregation to a position of doing the work. Does that help? Right. There's no voting in the teams or anything like that. The committees now vote on everything, where that would move to either the leadership council or the staff member.
Members are voted on, that it won't be.
Sure. Yeah, you can serve where you want to serve. Yep.
Yeah. And if there's an area that you're really passionate about, you could serve conceivably indefinitely. You know, if there's an area, say a music ministry that you love doing that, you can just do that. You know, it's not like you have to serve it for 3 years or
Right.
a second concert and then you're off. Was there one? Yeah.
Right here.
Yes.
It's Carol.
What were the reasons that you decided to do the traditional at 9 instead of 11? Because most children I know are up pretty early in the morning. And
There's really a lot that goes into that. One is that we were combining 2 traditional services, one that currently meets at 8 and one that meets at 10:45. So we were looking at how we could not move anybody too terribly much. And so for the 8 o'clock people to move to 11 or 11:15 was just a really huge jump. We also did a lot of research and listened to a lot of other advice from church consulting firms that said most of your older people tend to be up early already. We also polled a lot of teenage families and young adult families that say it's really, they're having to get their kids up at 5:30 and 6 all week long. And so it's really nice for them to be able to sleep in a little bit or have a little bit more relaxed morning. And that's certainly a kind of a target demographic that we hope that we'll be able to draw in more effectively. So those are some of the things that went into that decision.
you were preaching the message at both.
That's correct. Whoever is preaching that day, whether it's me or Pastor Jason, continue to preach at both services. Yes, absolutely. Very important. Great question.
My wife's always scared of what I'm going to say at a meeting.
She's not the only one.
She's not here today. So.
Oh, yes, she is.
Oh, gosh. Sorry, Pam.
Embarrassed. I agree that this church has got to get younger and that we have to have a emphasis on, call it the under 39s or whatever you want. But I think about 90% of the people here tonight are in this 61 and up, or probably not the 71 and up class. And when all's said and done, I just urge you, don't forget that many of us do like the traditional service, and we need to have a dynamic traditional service that appeals to the older folks until we all die off. Give us another 10 years and you won't have to worry about it. But
Well, one of the things we know actually is that
right now, I think you need to make sure that you survey the people that aren't here. I mean, our attendance has been dropping. Many of those people are still here. They just aren't in church. And the reasons for that need to be studied along with all of our long-range planning. We need to have a little retention planning on the end of it.
Thank you.
Maybe my wife will kill it.
Thank you, Martin.
Martin, I appreciate your comments, and
I appreciate the work that's been done. I just think the point that needs to be underlined to our very opening comments, we are headed down a pathway on that backside of that curve that you showed us. And we passed maintenance. Just look at the numbers. It's scary. The church I grew up in the middle of America, is on life support.
Mm-hmm.
They've got, the average is 79 to 80, and they have no financial problems at all, but they're on their last breath. And I just think that we need to not forget that we are literally, if we look at the numbers that you first showed, that's crisis.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at crisis, and if we don't make changes, we're going to be on life support. And I just think we have to reflect on that seriously. And those of us who are traditionalists and don't want to change have just got to suck it up. And I'm sorry, I'm going to be having to suck it up. And so, but I've got to look at it from the standpoint of crisis, and that's where we're headed.
Mm-hmm.
So the comment is, we got to do something, and we got to do it fast, or we're going to be on life support.
Pastor Jason and I talk about it pretty regularly because both of us come. He comes from Presbyterian Church. I come from the Methodist. Two of the largest denominations, Protestant denominations in the U.S., and both of our denominations are closing churches right and left. And every year at annual conference, one of the saddest moments for us, at least at the Methodist conference, is that we actually have a service where it's kind of like a funeral service where we recognize churches that have been thriving, incredible churches in the past. We celebrate what they did well. Usually there's a handful of people there to be there for that ceremony. And then we literally lay that church to rest. They turn in the keys and the church is closed. And it happens so frequently, and it's becoming more and more frequent. And it's a very real threat. And you're exactly right, David. We are at a place of crisis, and it's imperative. We don't know that all these changes will do what we want them to do. We're giving it our best wisdom, our best intellect after spending, 9-10 months in research and work. And I do, as your pastor, ask that you'll support it. I know that we'll all be inconvenienced by it. But it really is about reaching people who don't currently know Jesus. And as far as, for the choir, I know it's hard. They're being asked to come at 8:30, not at 8, just so that I can clarify that for you. They don't need to come until 8:30. So that is early. But, we have currently the people that come to our 8 o'clock service are an older group. And, they're here at 7:45 every Sunday morning. So we were taking that into consideration when we made this decision. And the times have changed since the church started. The time, I understand, when River Hills first started was 9:30 in the morning. So, times change all the time. And they will again in the future. Who knows what the times will be a year from now or 2 years from now.
It just occurred to me that for whatever reason, if it appears at least to me, if you were incapacitated for some period of time, whether it's just on vacation or for some other reason, that we would be without a pastoral presence on the governing body of the church, unless Pastor Jason somehow is part of that entity.
That's an excellent point, something we definitely need to take that under consideration. That's a great point, Don.
Doug's on that. Doug.
Excuse me. There's the executive pastor that serves on that leadership council as well. So there are.
That's. Yeah, Don, you're exactly right. He's absolutely correct.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It is. Yeah, it's something we definitely need to take back and look at.
I don't think anybody from that team is here, are they?
Just Doug right now.
Just a couple of points. When I come by, my family, I've got teenage girls, and we're going to go to the last service we can go to. I'm just telling you, that's how it operates when you have a 17-year-old. So, and but I will tell you, when we do go to the early service, I see so many cars here from people at 9:15, and I have good friends that are in the contemporary Sunday school class, and they're here at 9:15, and a lot of those people go to traditional. So I just want to, I'm thinking a lot of people may already be here, and they're just sort of flip-flopping a little bit of whether they're going to Sunday school first or whether they're going to church first. The other thing I'm just so excited about is, we're here to bring people to Christ. And if we've got somebody that's got 4 kids and they need to come here at 11, because I'm going 11:15, man, are we going to be out in time for Panther? This is what I'm thinking, honestly. But I'm like, we need to get out of our seats. We need to get these people in here and get them to know Jesus. And that should be our first thought. We're all going to be inconvenienced, as you said. But we need to be thinking about what we're really here for.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Pastor Gail, Carr, Rick. My wife and I have been here for 5 years. I fully realize and appreciate that we're young. Maybe not we're young in terms of our chronological age, but we're
You're young at heart.
There's a lot of people that we have come to know as dear friends who've been here for a long, long time. This is the second session that we have been to. Wanted to come to hear what other people had to say. Gail and Carr and Rick, the thing that impresses me as much as anything else, and this lady a moment ago mentioned it, the idea of freeing up people to become disciples for Christ is, I think, a tremendously important consideration to reflect on. We all know, Gail, you made reference to it earlier, the scripture from Matthew that talks about Jesus' final command to his disciples to go out and preach the gospel and make disciples for Jesus Christ. And I think the changes, in our opinion, as humble as it may be, is all about that. And I personally feel that I want to be as much a part of that as I can be. And I truly hope and pray that many of the people who have feeling one way or another about these changes will pray on it and decide, you know what, it really is all about Jesus Christ and the disciples that we are called to be for him. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
Anybody else? Anyone else?
Well, thank you for being here tonight. I want to close this with prayer. And if you do have, questions that you didn't want to ask, or didn't have time to ask, feel free to turn it in on a card. You don't have to put your name on it if you don't want to. We'll be happy to receive that from you. Or if you want to hang around for a few minutes, we'll hang around for conversation. Let's pray together. God, our desire is just to respond to the love that you have for us. We are so overwhelmed by your grace, by your love, by your mercy. We're so thankful, God, for this church and for the faithfulness of this church since 1973. Lord, this church has been here. It's been a light. It's been a welcoming presence, God, faithful to worship you, to draw people in. Lord, we just want to continue that amazing legacy of this church and for it to be as alive today as it was when it first started. Lord, help us to continue to do that. You know my heart, and I know you know the heart of the LRP. If there's anything we're doing, Lord, if we have come even collectively to a place that you don't want us to be, we're completely open to you changing us midstream, last minute. God, we just want to do what you want us to do and where you're leading us. Give us all grace and compassion and understanding for one another. Help us to mutually submit to one another, Lord, all for Christ's sake. And we pray, Lord, that the things that we're doing will bring even more people to know you. Someday we'll stand and give account before you, Lord, and we pray that you will have found us faithful to do what you've called us to do. We offer it to you in the name of Jesus. with tremendous gratitude. Amen. Amen. Grace and peace. Have a great night. We'll hang around for conversation.